So in 2018, can you give us a little understanding of what happened around that timeline and what the first complaint, the nature of the first complaint that came in, and what made you aware of that this investigation had now started? Welcome, brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining us today.
This is a very special episode of Truth Matters. Please welcome back Barbara O'Neill.
As many might know, in 2018, Barbara came under intense scrutiny by an Australian health authority for advocating a health message that placed the power of the healing in the hands of the individual and not in the medical establishment and the pharmaceutical companies. This is not to say she's ever spoken against these groups, but rather taught individuals to shape their lifestyles and habits to reduce their need for them altogether. It may be fair to say this is the basis for every health and wellness expert in the world. So what was it that caused Barbara to be the focus of such a level of scrutiny that she decided to leave her home country of Australia? What would we find if we were to review the timeline of Barbara's story and consider all the information? Well, it's time to find out. Barbara, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Matt and Mackenzie. It's great to be here.
Well, I know people all over the world are anxious to know how you've been doing and managing during these last couple of years of what seemed like very difficult crises. Could you take a minute and give everyone an update on how you've been and let us know how you're doing today?
Okay, sure. It was a big shock to us, what happened to me, because the fact is, I don't know how there can be a crime if there's no victim. The people that have put in the complaints have never met me. They have never been to our health retreat. I believe it's a differing of opinion. But what's been happening is that Misty Mountain is still running. I'm not allowed to speak, and I'm not allowed to give any health advice. But I love my mountain home, and so what I've been doing is I've become the gardener, and I certainly love gardening. And we've got a fantastic veggie garden now. We've got our compost bins up and running, and often in the morning when I'm pulling weeds and planting little seedlings, my two little grandchildren come and join me, so I certainly have enjoyed that. Meantime as well, I worked with our cook who came over from Germany to work with us for 3 months and couldn't go home. She's still with us, and I don't think she wants to go home now. She's 25, so I was able to work in the kitchen with her for a month and guide her in Misty's ways of eating. I've also been able to sit in with our lady that's come in as our health coach and advise and guide her. And the good news is that Misty Mountain is having guests and it's running very well. And then the opportunity came. We believe it was just a tiny little window of time for me to be able to come over to the US. Things relaxed a little bit in Australia because of summer, and it was just a point in time where I could come over to the US because things are starting to relax now in the US, in the Northern Hemisphere, because of summer, because the fact is people don't get as many colds and flus in the summer seasons. So when you ask how have we been, we've been great. I guess that's a real Aussie way of saying it, great mate, is that right? Or we say beauty mate. But I also know that God called me to do this. It was something that I hesitated at because I'm quite shy. But I also know that whatever God asks you to do, He will enable you to do it. And so I also wondered what God had in plan, or what God had in store for me now, what God had planned for me now. So I happily worked in the garden. I see it as my year of rest. Well, anyone that knows me knows that I don't stop, but I certainly enjoyed the garden. I was able to get a nice dose of sun every day and certainly had time to memorize and consider where God would be asking me to go next.
Well, we're very grateful that you've been able to join us. And we're going to try to take the audience through a bit of a timeline to try to reduce the confusion around what I'm sure there's been a lot of speculation about. And so the timeline that we're going to cover today is really the basis of the book your husband wrote, Michael O'Neill, called The Assassination of Barbara O'Neill, where in it he lays out in detail the issues you both faced in the last few years. And I think it's important that our audience try to get as much context as possible, because I think what we're going to see is that what you've experienced is a symptom of a much larger root issue, which is what we're kind of hoping to uproot today. So I'd like to take our audience to 2011, where you're at Misty Mountain Retreat. You guys have just opened this new retreat, and I believe you had actually purchased this property and were looking to redo it. Can you tell us a little bit about the property when you came to find it? It used to be an old Aboriginal school, if I understand correctly.
That's true. Now, we used to be in the next valley, excuse me, which was called Misty Mountain, so that's where we got the name Misty Mountain Health Retreat. And we were there, I think, about 8 years, but it was 2 hours from town. You had to drive through creeks and go up mountains, and probably our biggest complaint was access. And then this property in the next valley came for sale, and it used to be an Aboriginal boarding school. And when Michael was in his 20s, he'd just become a Christian, he used to go there and he helped to even start laying the foundations of some of the buildings. So he has warm memories from it was called the Mirrawinny Aboriginal Boarding School. It had gone into receivership, and it was in a very bad state of disrepair. Not only the buildings, but also the land. And if you can buy, in Australia, if you can buy land with houses on it, it's a great saving. It's far more economical to renovate a house than put in the plans and have to go through council to get to build a new house. So it was attractive to us in that there was even a bridge over the creek, it had electricity, it had a lot of buildings, and it was only an hour from town. So in that way, it was an attractive purchase for us.
Well, and what's really interesting there is this is where your videos first started to be recorded and put on YouTube. And 2011 seems to be this moment where the message that you've been advocating really exploded worldwide. And between 2011 and 2018, it seems like things were going quite well. Can you kind of tell us what things were like between this period of prosperity for your career in this health message?
It certainly was a period of prosperity. We ran with doing 2 programs, 1 week off, 2 programs, 1 week off. And we did that basically all year until December. In December, our staff had 4 weeks holiday. But what this did was that allowed me to go and speak. So every break, I would be going somewhere in Australia or Fiji or New Zealand and speaking. Sometimes we'd close for 2 weeks, which allowed me to go to the US and do meetings there. But we were always restricted by the fact that I had to get home and be part of the program. Our business certainly blossomed. We were averaging 12 to 14 guests per program, and what I think really accelerated that was the lectures going up on YouTube. It was probably about 2014. We usually have my lectures filmed every 3 years. So it was about 2014 when a guy named Henry he's got a ministry called Beyond Patmos. He asked permission to put the lectures on YouTube, and that's when things really blossomed, so to speak. We basically, after that, we did not have to spend any money on advertising because the YouTube videos did it. Even when I was lecturing in town, so if I was lecturing in town, I usually, that's in the week off, I do Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, and then I do a Saturday morning lecture on the mind. Those meetings blossomed because they would advertise Barbara O'Neill. People would say, "Who's she?" They would Google it, find my lectures, get a taste of it, and think, "Yeah, that's interesting." So the YouTube videos really just opened the field